So the reason I'm here is, as Martin said, the Europe issue looms large. Britain, far from being dragged into a wicked European superstate, has almost been given the keys to the kingdom. And what does that mean? All member states now agree, and have done for many years, but they put it in writing last June, that in order to succeed in the future, the single market has to be completed. Now, the single market is more or less completed in goods. Many of you will know that it's not completed in services. Services represent 70% of our economy, and indeed that of Europe. And so imagine, they say, the enormous economic and social opportunities that would come if governments put their shoulder to the wheel and made sure that the barriers intervening with the creation of the completion of the single market were swept away. So Nicola, myself, and a number of other business people have agreed to set up something called a Prosperity Forum. This fits in directly to the campaign that was launched this morning, because what it does is provide ballast behind the argument that we have to be in the European Union for jobs and growth. And so, with Nicola and others, we will be providing the ammunition to politicians and the media to make sure that the old saw, which I indeed heard this morning, the single market is important because 3 million jobs depend on it. So thank you, Nicola, for joining us in this enterprise. You were missed this morning. It was a raucous event. And it was raucous because, funnily enough, I'd just come to the event from appearing on BBC Radio 5 Live, and I was up against a lady called Deborah. And Deborah wanted to leave the European Union because she hated Germany. And whatever I said to her, it all came down to the Germans. And what that made me feel is that this battle is going to be incredibly tough. Because just like in the Scottish referendum, many of you will say, I wonder why there wasn't a positive case for the Union made in the Scottish referendum. And would you believe the reason why there wasn't a positive case was because nobody had made a positive case for the Union in 30 years. Nobody wanted to hear one. They were only interested in the risks. And so what we are going to do is to make a positive case for Britain to be involved, because the success of our involvement will be creating more jobs and more growth and more opportunities for the people in this room to both provide and obtain finances for small and medium-sized enterprises. So the two areas that I would just like to briefly mention, first of all, comes down to the Capital Markets Union. Now, can I make a ridiculous straw poll? How many people have heard of the Capital Markets Union? Not everybody. And it's interesting, because the man in charge of the Capital Markets Union is the only British commissioner in Brussels. And the purpose of the Capital Markets Union is to open up the whole of the European continent to access to finance other than through banks. Nearly 80% of business finance in Europe is through bank finance. And this is perceived, given the zombie state of many banks in the European Union, as being the real fundamental drawback to small, medium-sized enterprises obtaining the finance they need to grow. So, for example, United States SMEs get 5 times more of their finance through alternative financial arrangements than they do through banks in Europe. In Japan, the capital marketization for SMEs in regard to obtaining finance is 92%. In the USA, 143%. In Europe, it's a rather paltry 60%. And the gap between that of the United States accessibility of finance and that of the European Union is actually representing that 3.1 trillion pounds of accessible finance to small and medium-sized enterprises is just not there for them, because the market has not been liberated in that way. So in the UK, it's amazing that 70% of SMEs will only go to one financial services provider. They won't look across the market. So here is a barrier, a substantial barrier, recognized from the top, from the Commission itself, to our own Commissioner, to all governments who've signed up to this project. But of course it hasn't been filtered down, nobody knows about it very much, and consequently if nobody does, then it's highly unlikely that the politicians we need to bang the drum for this, in order not only to facilitate the finance, the access to finance of which I'm talking, but actually to provide a reason for the City of London to stay in the European Union, because the only chief beneficiary of this capital markets union in Europe will be the City of London, and financial operations such as your own and Nicola's. So therefore, you may ask, what is the reason for the name British Influence? It is quite simple. You are influential people with influential businesses, and we are asking you, Nicola and I, to exercise influence over the government to make sure the Capital Markets Union, which will benefit you and your clients, actually takes place. Because I report back from Brussels that the people who are dragging their feet, that is the governments that are dragging their feet in the effort to complete this fantastic project, are sadly none other than our own government. So it's why you, together with us, by putting pressure on the Treasury and other government agents, can make this very valuable policy development work for you. The second and final aspect of what I'm going to talk about with regard to the completion of the single market is that of the digital single market. Now people tell me, and it's quite right, that the digital businesses are themselves not alone of interest in completing this critical, uncompleted aspect of our common market. Trade in digital goods is now, and services, is now spread across those which are online businesses and indeed offline businesses. Now the UK is one of the most digitally advanced economies in Europe. It ranks 6th out of the 28 member states in Europe. If we completed this single market, in the Capital Markets Union, £3 trillion worth of finance which could be accessible for your clients. As far as completing the digital single market, I would add an extra 4% to European GDP, which would disproportionately improve and benefit us. So we have to do that, and it's critically important that businesses get behind something so significant for jobs and growth in this country. And it's so critical because only 17% of small and medium-sized enterprises in this country sell online, and only 7% of SMEs sell online across borders. The reason is, of many problems, but the main reason is that the compliance with company law and consumer protection standards, 28 different iterations of them, is a deterrent. The digital single market will bring together those company and consumer laws to enable that derisory figure that I quoted earlier on to be increased. And it has to be, because in a survey, half of British businesses indicated that they would start or increase their online sales across Europe if this was achieved. So, this is why it's so important. The single market is going to be front and center of the battle in the referendum that's coming. People will say that we only joined the common market and we didn't expect anything else other than that. But the common market we've got now, related principally to goods, could be so much better. The more jobs that would be created, the more competitiveness will come out of it if the UK got stuck in order to complete the things which would disproportionately advantage our country. So that is why British Influence is essentially the think tank behind the In campaign. And that's why, with Nicola, we will bang the drum to make sure that awareness is raised, not only for the small and medium-sized enterprises, for which the single market is of real benefit, but for the country itself. Because without the single market, the conditions of trade would be much more difficult, and the barriers to trade would be much higher.